Well, the United States divested of its tactical nuclear weapons in Asia at the end of the Cold War. And so we really have nothing that's postured within the region to respond quickly unless it comes out of the North American homeland. And I would offer that this is a deterrence gap when it comes to trying to prevent China or North Korea from using nuclear weapons if they see an opening. So that is, let's posit that we're in a conflict either with North Korea or China, and they find themselves on the losing end of that conflict. If they have theater low-yield nuclear weapons, which they both do, they may be tempted to use those if there's not a credible response that we could generate from within theater. And for those reasons, as well as there's an important assurance component for Korea and Japan to have American nuclear weapons in theater, I think it is prudent for us to reposition American nuclear weapons into theater. And I think Korea makes the most sense. Let's just say that, let's posit that if we're talking about air-delivered weapons, so gravity bombs or cruise missiles, they're going to be stored at one of the big, joint bases that are in South Korea, like Osan or Daegu or so forth. Those bases are already going to be targets for North Korea anyways once the war begins. So it's not like the North Koreans are going to wake up and suddenly realize that Osan is a problem for them. So that's thing one. Thing two is, the weapons that we could employ coming off of a ballistic missile submarine or one of our ICBMs that's, based out in the missile fields of the American heartland, those have enormous yields on them. They have enormous yields on them. And I would offer that we want to look at options that have much lower yields, much lower explosive power as a way to try to constrain and limit the scope of the conflict. The other consideration there is trying to, again, constrain the scope of the conflict. If there's simply a war that's taking place between South Korea and North Korea, or South Korea and Japan and China, do you really, as an American, want to open up the American homeland and generate nuclear forces out of the American heartland and start targeting forces there in the heartland of North Korea or China? Because that could say, well, now you, China, or North Korea are incentivized to strike the American homeland as well. And so you want to try to prevent a horizontal escalation of the conflict as much as you can and keep it constrained. And there's also a promptness issue. And so if you're generating weapons out of South Korea that can get to targets in North Korea or China, it's simply going to go a lot faster than if you're trying to generate bombers or even ballistic missile submarines operating out of the North Pacific. I think if South Korea were to say, we're willing to assist with building nuclear weapons storage sites in let's say, Osan, and we'll cover the costs and we'll provide some of the site security, I think that would be helpful. I think that would, the United States is spending an enormous amount of money on its own nuclear modernization process. And if South Korean government were to say, we know this is a large bill and we know that the United States does this in large part to defend South Korea, therefore, we're willing to foot the bill when it comes to these storage sites in Korea. I think that would be a positive and help convince some American policymakers that they should consider this seriously. The threat's changed. I can't state enough how much the 2021 discovery of the Chinese nuclear breakout has impacted thinking within Washington. Clearly, China has made a strategic decision to expand its nuclear capabilities, and they are no longer satisfied with a minimal deterrence posture of only having a couple hundred nuclear warheads. I would submit that from their statements, they're no longer adhering to a no first use policy. And what Xi Jinping has said about his own ambitions for China is their desire to have a world-class military that can deal with problems on its periphery, which is basically, as they define it, most of Asia and the Western Pacific. And you couple that with North Korea continuing to build nuclear weapons, continuing to threaten almost on a monthly basis at this point, South Korea, Japan, and the United States with nuclear annihilation. Things are simply getting bad, particularly in the Western Pacific with our key allies. And you know, it's simply a threat that we can no longer ignore.